Why does a strand of spaghetti never break in two? 3, 4, 5, whatever you like, but never in two? Why? Why don't woodpeckers get headaches? In a bar brawl, is it better to be attacked with a full or empty beer bottle? Does the urgent need to urinate have a mysterious effect on our decision-making capacities? Is there such a thing as a necrophiliac homosexual duck? And finally, could a really stinky cheese prevent you from catching malaria? All funny, interesting questions. But are they science? This institution has produced 45 Nobel laureates and 8 US presidents. Just a stone's throw from Boston, Harvard is the oldest and most distinguished university in the USA. At the heart of the campus stands the august Sanders Theatre, a temple of knowledge and good taste that hosts conferences and concerts. Yet every year since 1991, a strange ceremony has taken place here. 10 Ig Nobel Prizes are awarded to 10 scientists who have conducted particularly bizarre or bewildering pieces of research. Ig Nobel, it sounds a bit bizarre, but the winners are genuine scientists and bona fide Nobel laureates come to present the awards.
2010 Nobel laureate in economics, Peter Diamond. Each time we announce a new winner, an Ig Nobel Prize winner comes out and a Nobel Prize winner comes out, it's as if the universe has two opposite extremes, and those extremes are meeting.
A few examples. Ig Nobel Prizes have gone to research projects such as: how do you make diamonds with tequila? How can you turn a single bra into 2 perfectly functional gas masks? Why do pregnant women never tip forward?
Our secret for balance is we lean back.
Is it possible to observe and explain the dynamics of the hula hoop with the assistance of authentic Nobel Prize winners? Close by the Sanders Theatre is one of the hideouts of the Ig Nobel gang, as they call themselves. Along with founder Mark Abrahams, we find university professors, journalists, opera buffs, and the incurably inquisitive. What do they all have in common? An extravagant fondness for weird or absurd research.
Ig Nobel Prizes are for things that make people laugh and then think. It's things that are funny when you first encounter them, and then a week later they're still rattling around in your head, and all you want to do is tell your best friends about them. You know, deep down, they're also intended to be a way to, in a sneaky way, get people to become curious about things that ordinarily they would try to avoid.
A worthy aim. But it does raise questions. Is funny science still science? If so, why do we find it funny? And what do the Nobel Prizes have have to do with all this? In other words, what exactly do they celebrate on this madcap science day held on the stage of the Sanders Theatre in Harvard each year? Let's take a closer look to find out. First, we discover that funny science is perfectly willing to study things like this. Why, yes, why do uncooked spaghetti strands never break in two? The spaghetti research was conducted here in the centre of Paris at the Jean Le Rond d'Alembert Institute. Basile Audoli and Sébastien Neukirch, the scientists responsible, won the 2006 Ig Nobel Prize for Physics. In their lab at the University of Pierre and Marie Curie, Basile and Sébastien study phenomena such as the fall of a viscous fluid on a moving surface, or a little rabbit, or a miniature horse, along with the dynamics of shaken hair. Can these phenomena be reduced to equations? The question of spaghetti is actually a long-standing problem in physics. The great scientist Richard Feynman, winner of the Nobel Prize for Physics, is said to have spent a whole evening with friends trying to solve the mystery.
Yes, Feynman tried breaking spaghetti. He tried to break strands in two and actually didn't understand why the spaghetti never broke in two, but rather into several sections, with the strand fragmenting.
The amazing thing is that there really is no exception to the rule.
Yes.
4,
5.
Yes.
5.
4. Ah.
6.
You see? Again, the same, and again. The strand never breaks in two. Why? Is it due to the internal makeup of the spaghetti? In its simplest version, all industrial pasta is made the same way. A kneaded mixture of wheat flour and water is moulded into shape and then dried on frames in a hot air tunnel. Here's a strand magnified 1,000 times. Will it provide the answer?
So in this electron microscope image, you see the cross-section of a spaghetti strand. As you can observe, it's a granular, inhomogeneous material with cracks, parts of the material that are less dense. That explains the first break, which happens at the weakest spot. But it doesn't explain why you have a number of breaks in this spaghetti fragmentation experiment.
So, they have to keep on looking, breaking spaghetti for hours and even weeks on end. Yet the history of science teaches us that one day, who knows how, the intrepid researcher has a flash of insight. For want of a better word, we call it intuition.
Then one day we actually realized that contrary to expectations, the two breaks don't happen at the same time. In fact, the idea, the intuition, was that the effect triggered in the first break may be passed on in some way and trigger the second break.
To check their hypothesis, Basile and Sébastien set up a high-speed camera to film their strand breaking. They used a simple catapult system to break the pasta and observe the phenomenon more closely. Now, in a cinematic dream of elegant slow motion at 1,000 frames a second, the solution is revealed. The guilty party is a wave that's propagated.
As soon as you release the spaghetti, you see a wave moving along the strand. The excess curvature is enough to break the strand in several places. You release it, you produce a wave and a secondary break. You release it and you get a traveling wave of excess curvature and a secondary break.
The wave propagation is dampened quickly. That's why you rarely see more than 10 breaks. Empirical observation isn't enough, though. Our researchers still have to model the phenomenon with equations that describe the behavior of a moving thin object. Their results are published 6 months later in Physical Review Letters, a respected journal. The Ig Nobel scouts noticed the article, and the rest is history. Today, Basile and Sébastien are working on other models. One of them explores the behaviour of a drop of water falling on an elastic surface. The other looks at sheets covering a ball or the little rabbit we saw earlier. At this point, you're probably politely asking, what use is all this?
This study of spaghetti fragmentation was a piece of basic research. So we obtained basic research results. Often, if the basic research is used in a medical or engineering application, 10 or 20 years go by between publication of the results and their application.
If you're in a hurry, there are already some links with the real world, though. This unfortunate pole vaulter, for example.
The pole vaulter's entire technique consists of bending the pole as much as possible to store energy and vault as high as they can. So the curvature is very, very strong. The pole vaulter runs up as fast as possible, curves the pole as far as possible, and sometimes, if there's a defect in the pole, you get a first break, and occasionally a pole that breaks into a number of pieces because of the same phenomenon, undulating waves that travel along the pole and bend it too far.
A greater worry, can the control rods used to slow and accelerate atomic fission in a nuclear reactor also break like strands of spaghetti? Well, yes, they can.
These control rods are lowered to slow the reactor. They're subject to major temperature gradients, and as they age, the secondary break phenomenon can occur.
Even if the equations aren't always identical, the phenomenon affects most long, thin constructions, bridges, planes, skyscrapers, girders. Although we don't realise it, we're surrounded by giant strands of spaghetti. When there are impacts, all these structures move in waves that can break them into a number of pieces, just like uncooked spaghetti. So, the funny side of science opens the score. We started out laughing at the spaghetti breakers, but ended up admiring their scientific precision and the potential applications of their discovery. Let's go deeper into our exploration of the physics of materials. This time, we'll visit a seedy district somewhere in Europe at around midnight. Bar, a fight. Naturally, the brawlers use any weapons that come to hand, including beer bottles. Only the funny side of science could take this still unanswered question seriously. In a fight, should you choose to be knocked out with a full or with an empty beer bottle? The Swiss team that answered this question received an Ig Nobel Peace Prize in 2009. But action speaks louder than words.
John Wayne wouldn't even flinker.
We're now in Bern, the political capital of Switzerland, and here's a place that's unique in the world. This machine precisely gauges the energy of impacts of different objects on the human body. Led by Beat Knubel, researchers in this forensic lab have developed ingenious systems to simulate every type of attack. Judges use their conclusions in reaching their verdicts. For instance, this machine simulates an arm being twisted when force is applied to arrest someone. Ouch. This simulation shows how blood flows from the human body when victims are stabbed with various kinds of blades. This cranium is made from a material that perfectly imitates the human skull. It's used in many experiments, including this one.
in physical disputes, people use anything at hand, for instance, a beer bottle, to hit somebody else. We've been repeatedly asked at court whether hitting somebody over the head with such a bottle is dangerous if it suffices to crack the skull, and if so, whether empty or full beer bottles are more dangerous.
Since they can't wait around in a bar to observe a real brawl, they found another solution: a drop tower. Here's the material: 10 beer bottles, 6 empty and 4 full. Good traditional Swiss beer. To precisely calculate the energy of a blow to the head with a bottle, they try to break it with a steel ball. Given the mass and height of the projectile, they can calculate the force of the blow in joules.
To simulate the head, we had a bit of plastiline for the scalp, synthetic scalp, and a piece of synthetic bone to simulate the skull.
The experiment continues with a full beer bottle.
Ace lost.
Still intact. They try an even higher level of energy. The same thing in slow motion.
The full bottles broke at 30 joules, so with 30 joules they all were broken.
Another experiment with an empty bottle this time. At 30 joules, nothing. At 35 joules, still nothing. They start again at 40 joules. An unexpected result. The empty bottle is significantly more solid. But why?
The full bottles contain obviously beer, which is an almost incompressible fluid. So we have a pressure and an incompressible fluid, which, if the bottle is slightly deformed, will then lead to a shattering of the bottle.
Since you need less energy to break the full bottle than the empty one, you might conclude that it's less dangerous. But both full and empty bottles can cause serious injury.
The human skull breaks between 14 and 70 joules, depending on where it's struck. So both types, full and empty, can break the human skull.
The conclusion is that only fake bottles should be allowed in fights. That could be smashing fun, but remember, judges may use these tests to decide whether you caused an accident or actually committed a serious crime, and that's no laughing matter. Although human skulls can't stand up to beer bottles, the woodpecker's head can apparently handle anything. So the funny side of science turns to the question of why woodpeckers don't get headaches.
In all the years of these ceremonies, Ivan Schwab is the only Ig Nobel Prize winner who has showed up in a woodpecker costume.
This is 2006, and Ivan Schwab is receiving his Ig Nobel Prize for ornithology. He's worked out why woodpeckers don't suffer from migraines. Sacramento, capital of California.
You see a doctor on TV, it's always...
An eminent ophthalmologist at the University of California, Davis, Ivan Schwab normally specializes in the cornea.
What?
But since he's curious about anything that may affect the eye, he's also fascinated by the ocular systems of small creatures such as shrimps, insects, birds, and reptiles. How did evolution equip them with efficient ways of seeing? He studied woodpeckers because they're truly amazing birds. In the mating season, the champion, called the pileated woodpecker, strikes tree trunks with considerable force, up to 12,000 times a day, at a rate of 20 impacts per second.
The equivalent for a man would be pounding your head face first into a brick wall 12,000 times a day at 14 miles an hour.
In these conditions, why isn't the woodpecker's brain reduced to a jelly? And how come its eyes don't end up flying out of their sockets? A mystery. Seek and you shall find. Ivan Schwab began by filming his woodpecker with a high-speed camera. The video revealed some interesting facts. First of all, the woodpecker is a living hammer.
If you think about a hammer, if it goes straight in and doesn't come as a glancing blow, it's much more effective. But in addition, as he strikes straight ahead, he has less tearing forces, because if he glances from the side, he risks tearing the blood vessels. But there's more to this. As the hammer occurs, the third eyelid, also called the nictitans, will come across the eye and hold the eye in place. The nictitan protects against flying wood chips. It also holds the eye back, like a seatbelt in a car.
Let's move inside the skull, slowly dissected and reproduced in 3 dimensions by an X-ray scanner. We discover that the woodpecker's brain is very, very small. This is the equivalent on a human scale. A small brain is less fragile because the effect of the impact is more widely dispersed. Apart from being small, the woodpecker's brain can't move freely. It doesn't float around in cerebrospinal fluid like the human brain does. In a human woodpecker, the brain would bounce in its fluid like this, with all the damage that would cause. Whereas the woodpecker's brain is firmly clamped and properly compressed in its cranium.
Woodpeckers have several other features that you can see here on this rotating images. You can see this lower jaw is very dense. It's much denser than the upper jaw, so that the lower jaw, the mandible, will absorb the energy down into the muscles of the neck and shoulders, so that the energy does not get transmitted to the brain. Then you can see these 2 bones that go around the skull. They start on the right nostril. They're also wrapped in dense muscle. And when the moment of strike occurs, the muscle and the bone clamp down around the skull to make a skull cap so that the skull doesn't shake on top of this hammer-like effect.
And here are 2 more reasons why woodpeckers don't suffer from migraines.
Most animals don't do anything that is painful. Fact 1. Fact 2 is that woodpeckers mate for life. And if the female woodpecker went out and spent her day hammering away for food and came back and said, "Not tonight, honey, I've got a headache," we'd have no more woodpeckers.
This research could inspire engineers who work on protective headgear. They should listen carefully. Ivan Schwab has a revolutionary idea: the woodpecker helmet.
In the woodpecker, the force is absorbed by the lower jaw and transmitted into the shoulder muscles. Perhaps a helmet could do the same thing by transmitting the force from the head down to the shoulders. It'd be a larger helmet, to be sure, but that might be a better way and a safer way, and certainly it's what the woodpecker has done.
Do we need to add that Ivan Schwab does not work for a helmet manufacturer? His research may well find applications, but only because he felt free enough to study migraines in woodpeckers. And played to the crowd by stepping up to collect his prize in a spectacular red-feathered headdress. So, let's move on from the woodpecker's brain to ours. The funny side of science has a lot to tell us about the complexity of human psychology. Only it could ask this burning question: what effect does the urgent need to urinate have on our decision-making ability?
Thank you. In our research, we examined whether a physiological form of control, bladder control, can also facilitate behavioral control. This suggests that neurological control signals are task unspecific, which has important implications for impulse control. Thank you.
Let's put it more simply. Everyone knows that stores cunningly present little items such as candy and chewing gum at the checkout, where customers buy them without thinking. Marketing specialists call this kind of purchase impulse buying. Well, what Miriam Took and her colleagues have discovered is that if you badly need to visit the bathroom, you no longer buy the little items at the checkout. The fuller your bladder, the less impulsive you are. So what's behind this strange fact? Paris, Place de la Sorbonne, just round the corner from the ancient Temple of Learning. This is the research centre of INSEAD, the European Institute of Business Administration. We're going to reenact Miriam Took's experiment with the help of 6 young volunteers, 3 young men and 3 young women. 1:10 p.m. Everybody takes their place in the test room. The moderator tells them that they're going to taste different brands of mineral water and give their opinion. Nobody can leave the room during the test. 1:30 p.m. Everybody drinks, but look carefully. The group on the left has to drink the whole glass of water, while the group on the right must only drink a small quantity. They start again with glass B. Then glass C, and the last glass. 1:45 p.m. It'll take 40 minutes for the water to take effect. For now, the volunteers are given unimportant tasks to carry out. The only aim is to give their bladders time to fill up. Remember that the people on the left have drunk about a litre of water compared to a few mouthfuls on the right. 2:10 p.m. 25 minutes have gone by. The right-hand group is working normally, but there are some signs of discomfort on the left. 2:20 p.m. 35 minutes have gone by. The people on the left are getting rather agitated. Some furtively shift their posture. 2:30 p.m. 40 minutes have passed. There's a sense of urgency on the left. The water has made it through the kidneys and is now distending the bladder. One young man can't wait any longer and asks if he can go. He's out of luck. The unfortunates on the left have no choice but to grit their teeth, fight the urge to urinate, master it and control it. Hold on, hold on, hold on. Now comes the real ordeal. Each one is given a choice. They can get 10 euros tomorrow or 12 euros in 25 days. 67 euros tomorrow or 85 in 70 days. The basic idea is very simple. It would be the same with millions at stake. You can ask for the money at once or you can wait and get more. The aim is to test their individual capacity to resist their initial impulse to take the money and run. In the last questionnaire, each participant has to assess their need to go to the bathroom on a scale of 1 to 7. Once the experiment's over, it's time for the conclusions.
For this task, we counted the number of times that people preferred this later but larger reward instead of the smaller, sooner reward. And here you can see that people who have to urinate more urgently actually choose more often for the later but larger reward. And this suggests that even in the domain of financial decision making, bladder control facilitates the ability to inhibit your tendency to go for an immediate reward, but facilitates the ability to go for a later but larger reward instead.
The conclusion is, provide lavatories at the entrance to your store if you want your shoppers to impulse buy. But more seriously, bladder control activates an area of the brain that apparently enables greater self-restraint in every part of life.
And when this area is activated, because one act of control is required, it unintentionally facilitates control in various other domains. And these findings suggest that people possess one general inhibitory network.
This theory was a little unexpectedly confirmed in the world of politics.
Not long after we presented this prize, there was an item in the news from England that the Prime Minister, David Cameron, apparently has been telling people that he uses this idea of filling your bladder as a piece of strategy. He feels that he's able to negotiate more forcefully, under better control, if he fills his bladder.
I don't know where he got this idea from, but it perfectly matches with my findings, so I think there's a real scientific basis for his behavior.
Do you think it works?
Yes.
There's a downside, though. The team who jointly received this Ig Nobel Prize for Medicine, led by American neurologist Peter Snyder, discovered that people's decision-making gets worse and worse when they need to pee too badly.
These impairments were the same, actually, as staying awake for 24 hours or if you reach the legal limit for driving at a bar. Why this relationship between thinking and peeing?
When you gotta go,
you gotta go.
Sadly, the speech was curtailed by Miss Sweetie Poo, the little girl tasked with interrupting speeches that go on a little too long during the ceremony. Never mind, we found out that the funny side of science may have added a psychophysiological chapter to Sigmund Freud's theory of repression. To continue with our Freudian theme, do animals share perversions we thought were purely human? Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Here, even the bridges are genuine works of art. Partly hidden by the Museum of Modern Art, here's the Museum of Natural History. It holds an impressive collection of birds, insects, and reptiles. The man before you was in turn a butcher's assistant, a teacher in Istanbul, and a guide in Costa Rica. Today, he's a museum curator. His name is Kees Moeilijker. In 1995, Kees witnessed a shocking scene that was part zoological curiosity, part true crime story. Here's the carefully stuffed corpus delicti, the first known victim of a rapist, necrophiliac, homosexual, Mallard.
When we awarded the prize to Kees Moeilijker, we had a big question in our mind. We could not decide from reading his paper whether this was somebody who is a superb writer with a superb sense of humor or someone who is simply insane.
That's a duck like this, in case you're not an ornithologist.
The crime took place on June the 5th, 1995, in this extension to the museum. In a certain light, the building's facade acts as a mirror. It was 5:55 p.m. Kees Moeilijker was quietly working in his office, when suddenly...
I heard a very loud bang against the window. It was a bird, but it must have been something very special.
Kees left his office and went down to the garden to see if the window had been damaged. When he reached the ground floor, he saw something astonishing.
I saw the duck. It was dead. It was laying on its belly. But next to the dead duck was a live duck. Then the live duck started to mount the dead duck. I said, hey, that must be necrophilia. Then I looked carefully, and then I saw both were of the male sex, homosexual necrophilia. This must be new to science. So I took my camera, I took my notebook, I started to make notes.
The rape lasted a long time, about 75 minutes. Case meticulously noted each stage of the attack.
At 5:55, the duck hit the glass and died. At 6:29, the rapist took a 3-minute pause. At 6:45, he paused for less than a minute. And at 7:12, I got hungry, I wanted to go home, and I disturbed the cruel scene and collected the dead duck.
Strangely, when Kees Moeilijke approached the crime scene, the rapist stood his ground.
So the duck was raping here, and I wanted to take the duck, I wanted to take the dead duck, but the live duck didn't want to go. He didn't fly away, so I had to chase him off. He said, "Rup, rup, rup, rup," and then I took the duck to the freezer and I went home.
So was there a misunderstanding? Might the attacker have mistaken the dead duck for a female?
No, that's impossible because the duck had the male plumage, the green head, and I have the proof that it is a male in this jar. The dead duck testicles. And this is the proof it's a male.
Observation has shown that rape isn't a rare occurrence among mallards, and 1/10 of the birds are apparently homosexual. But can a rapist homosexual necrophiliac duck really exist?
Necrophilia, that's new. My observation was the first ever recorded case of homosexual necrophilia in the mallard duck.
So the question is now whether perversion is a shared phenomenon. Are there duck necrophiliacs just as there are human necrophiliacs?
Necrophilia in animals is not a perversion, it's a mistake. It has to do with a sudden death in a position suitable for copulation. If that happens, necrophilia occurs in the animal kingdom. And with all these new buildings of glass, with traffic and other sudden causes of death, we'll see more and more cases of necrophilia in birds and mammals.
So ducks aren't perverts, that's a relief. But as with people, a suggestive sight is enough to have them all aflutter. Humans and ducks are impulsive creatures who should check out David Cameron's full bladder technique. You see? Everything's connected. Since everything's connected, is the funny side of science compatible with another, nobler kind of science, Nobel science? Apparently so, since Nobel Prize winners join the party each year.
Nobel laureate in chemistry from Harvard University, William Lipscomb.
The recently deceased William Lipscomb, 1976 Nobel Chemistry laureate, was one of the funniest and certainly the most loyal participants. He attended every Ig Nobel Awards ceremony from 1993 to 2010.
According to Tom Lehrer, hydrogen, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen...
Having seen Nobel laureates at the Ig Nobels, we thought we might try it the other way round. Observing the Ig Nobel Awards founder in Stockholm, in Nobel Prize country. Like matter meeting antimatter, would these two extreme opposites annihilate each other? Well, for the moment, everything seems quiet. Yet here's the intruder entering an anti-temple, the Alfred Nobel Museum, entirely dedicated to the founder of the Nobel Prizes. This is Alfred Nobel's death mask, but he doesn't seem to be spinning in his grave yet. Stranger still, Marc Abrahams provocatively lays claim to one of Nobel's protégées, Marie Curie.
This, of course, is the periodic table of the elements, because this is how it looked back when Marie Curie was around. It's got some holes in it. She's one of the people who helped fill in some of those missing pieces. At the time, probably most people who ran into this woman thought, she's nuts. She's crazy. And if the Ig Nobel Prizes existed, people would have nominated her, this strange, loopy woman, for an Ig Nobel Prize. Now, she got a Nobel Prize, and what she did changed the world.
During the visit, Mark takes time out to introduce the Ig Nobles to Nobel's heirs.
From extremely cheap materials.
Here he's paying tribute to the mayor of Vilnius, Artūras Zuokas, awarded the 2011 Ig Nobel Peace Prize for his discovery that parking violations involving expensive automobiles can be dealt with swiftly using a standard army vehicle. So, to sum up, we've seen that Nobel Prizes are compatible with Ig Nobles. And the converse is also true. The founder of the Ig Nobles seems perfectly at ease in the world of Nobel. Let's take our study even further. In Wageningen, in the centre of the Netherlands, not far from this magnificent windmill, we've discovered the perfect Venn intersection, a Nobel laureate who also has an Ig Nobel Prize. This time, matter and antimatter have finally merged. But he's not alone. Before him came the Russian-born Andrei Geim, 2010 Nobel Prize for Physics. 10 years before, Geim had been awarded an Ig Nobel for levitating a frog in a magnetic field. The picture went viral on the net and became a symbol of the Ig Nobel Awards. In 2005, the Netherlands' Bart Knolls received a Nobel Peace Prize awarded collectively to the members of the International Atomic Energy Agency for their work in promoting the peaceful use of nuclear energy. The following year, Bart was working on another good cause, the fight against the mosquitoes that spread malaria, a scourge that kills hundreds of thousands each year. Today, the battle against malaria has taken a new turn thanks to a formidable weapon, Limburger, a genuinely pungent Dutch cheese with a soft, gluey rind, noxious enough to rival France's whiffiest dairy products. In short, a stinky cheese. What's the connection with malaria? Well, the discovery that won Nobel Prize winner Bart his Ig Nobel Prize for biology, having shown that the female mosquito responsible for malaria is attracted equally to the smell of Limburger cheese and the smell of human feet.
Beat malaria and eat Limburger. Thank you.
To explain, this is the Anopheles gambii, one of the most deadly malaria carriers in the world.
And it is amazing because this is the most dangerous animal in the world. It kills between 700,000 and 1.2 million people every year, mostly children in Africa.
Acting as his own guinea pig, Bart Knolls decided to find out what part of the human body attracted this most lethal of mosquitoes. Anopheles, free of the disease, were introduced into the cage. Eagle-eyed researchers observed the insect's trajectory. The feet! The Anopheles gambii loves foot odour, especially when it's strong. As strong as Limburger cheese, in fact.
It was a spectacular discovery that came by reading an article which said that cheese smells after feet rather than the reverse. And this triggered us to start thinking about there must be something that is similar between cheese and feet. And the answer is because of the bacteria that are used for inoculating the cheese, for giving the cheese its specific smell, its aroma. And these bacteria are very similar to bacteria that you find on the human foot.
An experiment. 2 squares of paper were placed in the mosquito cage. One was smeared with Limburger cheese, the other wasn't. With no further encouragement, the Anopheles flocked to the paper, smelling of stinky cheese. So, what on earth is the use of this discovery? Just have a think. Traps, of course. Anopheles traps. When they get a whiff of the Limburger trap, they'll forget our feet.
What you see here is an experimental trap. And experimental traps are used to test to see how attractive a certain smell is. So what you see here in this small little tube, I put a piece of the Limburger cheese, and actually the air is coming down through the tube, and if a mosquito is flying towards it, then it gets sucked into this part of the trap and it ends up in this container. So we can count and see how many mosquitoes are attracted. Next year, the first trials with these smells are going to take place in East Africa to see whether we can reduce malaria by using the smells of Limburger cheese.
The ignoble spirit triumphs again. Bart was quite happy to work on stinky cheese to see if it could be used efficiently in the fight against malaria. So, what if you had to choose Nobel or ignoble?
I'm incredibly proud to be a recipient of a small piece of the real Nobel Peace Prize. That is wonderful, but I have to be honest with you. I think in the end I would give the preference to the Ig Nobel Prize. And why? Why is that? It's because Ig Nobel Prizes are given to people that are thinking out of the box, that are doing something that may be crazy, but it's new, it's novel, and it's contributing to science. And if you give me a prize for that, to honor my creativity, then I'm more proud of this than of that.
Need we say more? The funny side of science and serious science are obviously one and the same. One is the uninhibited side of the other. Funny science braves ridicule to ask fresh questions, those new questions that more conservative science doesn't think of or is reluctant to ask. In the seemingly chaotic play of ideas, you sometimes lose, but occasionally you win. If you do, science takes another step forward. It's human nature to be upset or amused by new ideas, which is often basically the same reaction. There's no doubt about it. It takes courage to make people laugh. But the Ig Nobel Prize winners have plenty of courage. It's celebrated once a year on the stage of the Sanders Theatre. Venerable Nobel Prize winners agree to play the clown by joining in the celebration. In fact, we may well have solved the Ig Nobel mystery. Anyway, here's another final roll of honour to celebrate the merging of two opposite worlds. Ig Nobel Prizes rewarding 3,000 years of world science. Over to Mark Abrahams.
If we had given Ig Nobel Prizes earlier, there are many people who would have been strong candidates. Here are some. Democritus of Abdera in about the year 350 would have been a strong candidate for explaining that everything is made of teeny, tiny particles. Isaac Newton in the 1680s would have been a strong candidate for an Ig Nobel Prize for explaining what sounded like a stupid question. He tried to explain why things fall down. Charles Darwin in the 1800s would have been a strong candidate for explaining that every human family includes many strange relatives, and that some of those strange relatives are monkeys. Gregor Mendel in the 1800s would have been a strong candidate for explaining how pea plants pass their legacy on to new generations of pea plants. Erwin Schrödinger in the 1930s would have been a strong candidate for scientifically analyzing whether a cat can be simultaneously both dead and alive.